Let's head into the Zoom room where we have the chair of the Cannabis Control Board, Attorney Vanessa Williams. Good morning.
Morning, Chris. Morning, Sabrina.
Happy Easter.
Sure.
Well, let's just get right into it. Where are the rules and regs, and what's the status of standing those up, Vanessa?
The board has adopted a final version of the rules. So what happened was we had a public hearing in late November, and we had 3 days of hearings and testimony from the public. There was a period where we were receiving email comments as well. And the meetings that we've had since then, up until about 2 weeks ago, we're all reviewing those public comments and discussing those comments and any changes we'd make to the rules. And so after we considered all of the comments that we received and made some changes to the rules that we had drafted and issued back in November, we adopted a final version about a week ago. And so where we are right now is the board made those edits to the document. It's about 100 pages of rules amongst the various sections. And we are going to transport that with the required impact report and studies to the governor, to the AG's office before they sign off and review it before it goes to the legislature.
So is it the legislature that would have the final approval?
Yes.
Okay. And I know.
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to follow up on all the debate that was that got everybody fired up regarding Tumon.
I like that, fired up.
What was the resolution?
The resolution was ultimately retail shops are the only facilities that can be in C zones, but they cannot be in H zones. So we brought in the director of the Department of Land Management to try to figure out whether, what areas of Tumon will be affected exactly. To our understanding, it's mostly H zone, not C zone. I'm not an expert in zoning law. That's why we brought the director on and consulted him, but we did not put any village restrictions. So the rules don't say you can't have any facilities in Tumon or any other village. They just say you can only have these certain types of facilities in these certain zones. And the only zone that could potentially be possibly in Tumon or elsewhere is if you find a pocket of a C zone. There are other.
I'm sorry. Could you just explain what is a C zone? What is an H zone for our viewers?
My apologies. So C zone is commercial zone, and H zone is hotel zoned. And by law, there's that you have the different zoning. So commercial zone, hotel zone. Industrial, I think light industrial, agriculture, and the law defines what are generally permitted uses in each of these zones. And so when we identified where you could grow versus where you can manufacture, where you can test cannabis, and where you can sell through your retail shop, we tried to identify those zones, only permit those zones where it's a consistent use. So the only zone or the only facility you would really potentially be able to find in a commercial zone is a retail shop.
So like a ABC store in Tumon, is that what you're saying? Like you could buy weed?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know
as
exactly
long as it's a retail shop, right?
Yeah, the retail shops can be.
And it has to be, there was something that Senator Rogel said that it can't be near a church or it can't be near a school, right? Something like that?
It can't be near churches, playgrounds, schools, or anywhere where kids congregate, which is, kind of a loose, loose verbiage. That's what the law says. And so that's something that we find in the law that was before we wrote the rules. So we try to make the rules consistent with that. But ultimately, so you have those like built-in protections on where a cannabis facility can be. But ultimately, when we were discussing this and the board was going back and forth about whether we can just put restrictions and say, you just can't have it in this certain village, this seemed like something that if the legislature had intended, if they had wanted to say, no, we're not going to allow this to be in this area, like they said, we don't want it near schools, we don't want it near playgrounds. They explicitly said that. They didn't say anything about Tumon. They didn't say anything about any other village. And so that seems kind of an overreach at a board level for us to just start Xing out villages.
Right.
And I can't speak for the legislature. Obviously, this is just something we work on, looking to see what they do with the draft rules that we have.
Vanessa, just to clarify, is there on-site consumption allowed at cannabis retail outlets?
No. So no on-site consumption, no public consumption right now.
Okay.
Will some of these Tumon businesses still have time to comment, I guess, on the adopted rules and regs? Or is it pretty much done? They had their opportunity.
Yeah, so the time for commenting to the board, the Cannabis
Right.
Control Board has, so we've already made our changes. So what we can do with the comments and how we can amend the rules is limited under the law. It says you have this period to make comments, you have a period to make hearings, and then the board can make changes pursuant to those comments you had at the public hearing afterwards. Now, so we couldn't take comments now and go back and say, okay, we're going to make another revision before we're going to change it with the legislature, just because of that process that's prescribed by law. But you got to remember, like all rules and even the law, we know changes all the time. The legislature makes amendments, and likewise, administrative bodies like the Cannabis Control Board can make changes, and it's anticipated that we will. I mean, I don't know of any jurisdiction in the country that has said, okay, these are our rules and this is how it's going to be, and they never touched it. I mean, it's like every jurisdiction we've looked at has made, multiple amendments, and usually it grows larger, but there are some things that they roll back completely. And so that's something that we anticipate. We don't have anything to observe. It's hard to say, oh, this is how this will play out in this industry, in this island, in our market. Once we have that, I anticipate once the industry is going for a year or two, I anticipate there's going to be changes that we see need to be made. And of course, the public can always comment on how something is working. That's how it works with everything. And if we need to change the rules, what we would do is propose another amendment, and we'd have to have another public hearing on that and go through that same process, have the public hearing, give everyone equal opportunity to respond to those amendments, and then go through that whole process again where we transmit it to the legislature.
Vanessa, what was your takeaway on how late in the game we saw a lot of this resistance for cannabis in Tumon? Because like you said, I know the comment period was when it was, but it kind of seemed like, I don't know if they just weren't paying attention or if it was because we were getting closer to the end of this process that they decided to really make a lot of noise about that issue.
Yeah, it was a little curious. So it was very late in the game that because we did have meetings, before the hearing for a year and a half at least, and every single meeting actually we invited. We have opportunity for the public to comment during a board meeting, which you don't always have, but board meetings are open by law, but we would actually, have public comment and accept it. And so this was it was only after, or literally on the last hour or day of the hearing or the morning after, that we got this really organized response. So that's difficult too. And I understand there's a lot of things that have been going on this past year. So, I could attribute it to some of that. But that is also, you have the rules and you have the process defined so that it could be most fair. The reality is different. If people aren't really engaged and weren't coming to all the meetings and weren't aware of that, we can only do so much. We can provide our public notice of when the hearings are. We put the proposed rules on the website. And try to get that word out. I don't know how many times I've been on the radio or on the news talking about it. And it's just, I guess when it comes to the last minute, maybe it got a little more real for people. And I think people were, in general, just we were all coping with everything else in the pandemic. But when this became, when it was at their door, then maybe that's what prompted action.
Sorry, I'm really just not clear on everything with this weed because I don't smoke. But if I wanted to open up a shop, I guess it doesn't matter what village, it has to be in a commercial zone. Is there a special license or permit, or can I be also an existing shop, retail shop, and also on the side sell marijuana?
Right. So I think how that would play out, and just to be clear, these are what we've adopted. I don't know if there's going to be changes at the legislature, so we could find something totally different. But the way it is written or proposed now is that you do need to get a special license if you want to sell cannabis. It's not like just going and adding a different service or product to your business license at Rev and Tax. You apply through the board. You have your own separate application process and review. Now, I anticipate that people, if you sold other products in your cannabis store or in your facility, let's say you're selling drinks or something else there, that's possible, but you would be subject to the highest level of scrutiny because a cannabis facility has a lot more security requirements and safety requirements than I'd imagine than just a mom and pop, regular retail mom and pop store. So I think it's possible. I don't know how viable it'd be for any particular business or, if that's something, that people are interested in, but you would have to get a special license. It'd be the cannabis facility license for it.
I mean, I think what we wanted to ask was, let's say I'm an existing, coffee slut, right? And then I want to sell coffee, but then I also want to offer the option of selling cannabis. Can an existing business add on a cannabis license and then add that service, that retail service to their existing business?
Yeah. So to clarify, I think they could. I think you could do that, but you'd probably have to make a ton of adjustments to your business, and you couldn't allow minors in it. So that's what I meant by, I don't know how feasible it is, if you were existing business, because you basically be transforming it into a completely different business because you have to have 24-hour security camera footage, on your business. You have to have, you have to have all of the products safely stored away. You can't have minors in there. That's a little difficult for any, given retail shop. But in theory, you could. There's nothing in the rules that say you absolutely cannot sell any other product except cannabis in your facility.
But if you do sell cannabis, no minors, no all those rules that you mentioned.
Security.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, that being said, I mean, that's interesting. That being said, do you think that it's still feasible for some of our lower level businesses to jump on into the cannabis market?
I think so. I mean, that is the hope. That was a major policy or, concern as we were drafting these rules and hearing comments. How does someone who's just starting out or a small, tiny business get into this industry? How does it not get dominated by the big players? And so you can see one of the ways to do that was to reduce the licensing fees. We looked at the license fees for medicinal facilities, and when they were too high for us to adopt by law, because the law prohibits our application fees from being over $5,000. So those didn't work as a placeholder anyway. So we dropped those substantially, and then you can have like micro cultivation facilities, which are much smaller, have reduced fees, reduced footprint, have an easier time getting licensed. So yeah, I don't see any reason, like looking at the cost for starting any other business,
Right.
why anyone who wanted to start this, given that, they know their product, or they know how to, how to get, I guess just know the product, why they couldn't get into the business.
How much is like, let's say I'm an existing business and like I said, I want to add on and sell cannabis and no minors and do all the things that I have to do. How much is that license?
Gosh, I want to say, I don't have it right in front of me. I think it's around a couple $1,000s.
I see. Okay.
Are there like hours when you can't sell marijuana? Because with alcohol, there's certain hours that you're
Right.
not allowed to buy. Is it the same kind of situation with marijuana?
I think so. And I think that would be as a result of alcohol regulations, actually. So, and because of federal restrictions on that. So I'm almost positive you can't have alcohol and cannabis in the same facility.
What about like a restaurant? Let's say like there's a restaurant and they have like a little part of their menu where it's like they have the edibles. Would that restaurant then not be able to have minors dining in at any time?
I would think not. Well, so the one problem is that you're not supposed to consume even edibles on site. There's no public haven't permitted consumption, in like cafes. That's not something that we're ready to do. I mean, the law is very clear on saying, okay, no public consumption, although it does give the board authority to change that if we, enact rules otherwise. But this is one of those things where, okay, we're just starting out. And I think kind of a way to hedge against those fears and unknowns is we're not going to open it up 100% completely. This is a huge fear for I think the tourism industry. The reason why they don't, not just the appearance of the shops, and having cannabis leaves and that be discouraging families, it's the fact that people will be consuming it in Tucson.
Yeah.
And
So-
of course, community concerns, if this isn't mainstream yet, not completely mainstream.
Well, I
Just
asked
open a
because-
drive-through marijuana,
Because I think people
Yeah,
have in their mind like how it's going to be, and I think people are thinking that once these rules and regs are approved, they're going to be able to go to a cafe and like light up 5 spliffs and just be. But with these rules and regs,
No.
there's no cafes, no on-site consumption at all.
And so you can't be criminally penalized for that anymore, right? It's been decriminalized. But if you're a facility and you're permitting that, then we can ultimately we could yank your license. That's there's any violation of the licensing laws, we would shut you down. And obviously, that's that's not feasible for business. So, we wanted to get it out there to get as many. Make the industry as accessible to as many as possible, especially small businesses, local businesses, but not making it a free-for-all where people have this idea of Amsterdam in the Pacific,
Yeah, that's the idea that we had, Vanessa. Why are you saying it like it's a bad thing?
That's not what we were trying to do. We were just trying to make a new safe market.
Could we quickly just touch on the growing part of it, right? Like the grow houses and what are the rules on those? Because that's a little heftier license, right?
Yeah. And there are different tiers, so depending on how big your canopy is. And before we get into all the details, I'll give the caveat. I am not, the growing, well, in general, growing and agriculture, I'm not as familiar and intimate with how their regular licensing works. But I'll answer as best I can.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Vanessa. Where can we look at these rules and regs that were adopted? Is it available online?
We have the proposed rules on Reventax website at
Okay.
Cannabis Control Board's landing page, where we have like our minutes and the economic impact study. But I don't know if that's the final version. If not, I will make sure it is, today.
Okay.
But usually they're about updating the website. And then, of course, I will be transmitting it this week to all the people, the governor, the AG's office, and then that'll be part of our public record as well.
Vanessa, before we let you go, I did want to get whatever update you can give on the ACLU abortion lawsuit.
Yeah, sure. We had a hearing. I think about 3 weeks ago now. Before that, so an update is the lawsuit was challenging 2 statutes that were prohibiting telemedicine abortion, and the government and the plaintiffs have stipulated that one of them will not go into force. So we've settled on half the issues. So they're saying that telemedicine can be allowed. These doctors can provide the service. So that was a big win. The other provision in law that's still in dispute and that we just had a hearing on was whether these physicians can give the information that's required by law to their patients via video conference, or if the patients are going to be required to see someone else who's not necessarily a physician here on Guam. And that's something that we have not resolved, and we're waiting a decision on. It's a preliminary injunction decision. So just saying until the trial, this is how the judge thinks is what's most likely to prevail. And so we will permit the physicians to consult, or we will not permit the physicians to consult until the trial.
Sorry, just to go back to cannabis before we let you go, because we're on top of the hour. Are there restrictions on advertising for cannabis?
Advertising for cannabis, I believe there are restrictions on packaging and labeling. I can't remember off the top of my head what advertising restrictions there
Are we going to see?
I don't.
Are we going to see a big cannabis on the side of the mass transit buses, or?
I don't know. I don't think I don't recall off the top of my head. I don't think that we put that many restrictions in advertising.
Okay.
We just require disclosures in the products themselves.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for your
Thanks,
time.
Vanessa.
Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good week.
Okay.
Take
you
care.
too. Right on. 7:57. Good talk. Bree, do you feel like you know a little bit more about what's going to happen?
Yeah, a little bit more, but I would really like to read the final draft.
Right. Yeah.
Where's the final? The
The,
final.
the almost final
Yeah.
draft. That's definitely interesting, because I think, I thought that it was just going to be wide open, that, you were going to have the cafes, you were going to be able to go and, smoke your jizzy and, whatever, eat your brownie someplace, but that's not even going to happen.
No on-site consumption.
Right. And there's still no public consumption of cannabis. So that was pretty interesting. It looks like they have tried, and I know